Hello again. Well, this time you join me in Lincolnshire for more strange tales from my home county. Now, if you watched my video Mysterious Lincolnshire, then you might recognise this building behind me. It appeared briefly at the start of the video, but I forgot to mention the interesting history associated with this building. Lawn opened in 1820 as Lincoln Asylum. It was the first purpose-built hospital for the mentally ill, and it was truly pioneering. In the 19th century, hospitals for the mentally ill, or lunatic asylums as they were more commonly known, were truly dreadful places. The focus was on restraint rather than rehabilitation. But not here at the Lawn, thanks to the pioneering methods of Dr. Charlesworth. He banned hospital staff from using restraints of any kind or violence against the patients, which was normal practice in the majority of hospitals. Instead, patients here at the Lawn were encouraged to take up hobbies and to help with the day-to-day running of the hospital. The results were so impressive that the system was adopted by hospitals throughout the country. However, his revolutionary approach to treating mental illness was unpopular with many of his peers. In 1824 he became involved in an argument with Colonel Charles Sibthorpe, who was Member of Parliament for Lincoln. The row culminated in a duel being fought between the two men, which took place on the 9th of August 1824 at a secluded spot near Burton by Lincoln. Although shots were fired, both men missed, and honour was satisfied. Now, of course, with so much history, it's not surprising that there have been many reports of ghostly apparitions haunting the corridors and grounds of this building. Many of the reported sightings are of children dressed in white hospital gowns. They wander the grounds and corridors as if looking for something witnesses cannot see. Also, the scream and cries of former troubled patients are sometimes heard emanating from the walls. The Lawn might possibly be the site of a much older hospital. During building work at the Dorber Gardens in 1985, human bones were unearthed. Radiocarbon dating showed they had died from an infectious disease in the 14th century. It is thought that a leper hospital dedicated to St. Bartholomew, first recorded in 1312, once occupied the site. The Lawn closed as a hospital in 1985, at which time it was acquired by Lincoln City Council. It was sold to the Stokes Company in 2016 and is now a wedding venue and an event centre. This is the church of St. Peter and St. Paul in the market town of Caistor. There has been a church on this site since the 7th century, but the present church dates from around 1050 AD and has been added to over the centuries. A Roman camp once occupied the site, and according to local legend, Simon the Zealot, an obscure apostle of Jesus, fled to Britain soon after the crucifixion, but he was captured by the local Romans and was crucified in Caistor on the 10th of May AD 61. There are two interesting artifacts housed in Caistor Church. This glass case contains a fragment of wall from the ancient city of Al-Ashahir in Turkey. In the book of Revelations, the city was named Philadelphia, the White City, or City of God. The fragment contains stone, cement, and human bones. The Ottoman Sultan had a hatred for the Christians of the city by making a wall of their bones and blood. This grisly artifact has been housed in Caistor Church since 1886, and according to church notes, it belonged to the Reverend T.W. Mossman, who was the vicar of West Torrington, a small hamlet near the town of Rugby.
but unfortunately the notes fail to mention how the stone came to be in the vicar's possession. Another curious relic housed in a glass case is the gad whip. The whip is 6 feet in length and a lash of over 7 feet. A leather purse attached to the stock would have contained 30 silver coins, said to represent the 30 pieces of silver Judas received for his betrayal of Jesus. The purpose of the whip was connected to a strange Palm Sunday ritual when rent was paid for land at Ravensthorpe near Broughton. Every year on this day, the tenants of this land, which belonged to the lord of the manor of Hunden, had to provide a whip and send it with a man to Caistor church. During the reading of the first lesson at Matins, the man cracked the whip 3 times in the church porch. At the beginning of the reading of the second lesson, the whip was waved 3 times over the head of the clergyman, and all the while the streets were packed with rowdy onlookers. The origin of this strange custom has not been ascertained. Some allege a tradition that the gad whip service was a self-inflicted penance by a former nun of the Broughton estate for killing a boy with such a whip. The ceremony was said to incite unruly behaviour in the town, and there was a petition to get the practice stopped. The petition had the desired effect. The whip went out of use in 1846 when the land of Broughton changed hands. Another curious tale is attached to the church organ. In 1967, a clergyman heard the sound of organ music echoing through the empty church, but when he went to investigate, there was no one there. The ghostly music was said to have been recorded by the vicar, but the recording, as far as I'm aware, has never been made public. Alnwick is a small village situated 4 miles north-east of the town of Sleaford. The parish church is dedicated to St Edith and dates to the 13th century. Outside the churchyard walls can be found a glacial erratic known as the Drake Stone, which is the subject of several local legends. According to one tradition, recorded by the Lincolnshire folklorist Ethel Rudkin, a farmer was ploughing in a field known as Drakestone Close, when he was horrified to find his horses and plough fast disappearing into quicksand which had suddenly appeared in his field. A drake flew out of the hole where the horses had disappeared and flew away quacking. The next morning the field was back to normal, but for a slight depression with a large boulder in the middle of it which was shaped like a drake's head. Hence the stone was called the Drake Stone. It was said that under the stone there was a great deal of hidden treasure, and many efforts were made to obtain it. But the drake, the guardian spirit of the stone, brought bad luck to those trying to find it. Another version of the story says that the devil lived in a cave beneath the stone, and that the cave was filled with treasure. The Drake Stone originally stood 2 fields away from the church, and it was moved to its present location in the 1920s by the Reverend Dodsworth, vicar of Alnwick, to prevent it being an obstruction to ploughing. However, during transport, the stone broke into 2 pieces. Another more mundane story says that because 2 drakes took to sheltering beneath the stone, and it was such an everyday occurrence to see them there, that the stone soon became known as the Drake Stone.
It's hard to imagine, but this corner of the road, now formed by the A18 and the A15 between the villages of Scorby and Sturton in North Lincolnshire, once had a reputation for being very haunted.
The area used to be known as Lidgett's Gap, after Captain Lidgett, a Roundhead soldier killed on the road here in a skirmish with Royalist troops during the English Civil War. And the story goes that he was buried at the crossroads under an ash tree with all his gold, and his ghost fiercely guards the spot. Substance was given to the story when workmen widening the crossroads unearthed a coffin containing human bones. They were thought to be the bones of Captain Lidgett, and the locals took the bones as grisly souvenirs. However, the bones are likely to have been the remains of a suicide buried at the crossroads, a grisly custom that persisted until it was officially abolished in 1823. It is not known whether there was a skirmish in Brigg or Sturton during the Civil War, and there is no record of an important battle. It's been suggested that the name Lidgett is likely to be a reference to the Lidgett, which stood at or near the spot between the east and west fields before the open lands were enclosed. A Roman bathhouse and traces of a Roman villa were found nearby, and money found on the road blown by strong winds in the 19th century can be explained by the low-value Roman coins still occasionally found in the area. Until the early part of the 20th century, this area was a desolate spot, already rumoured to be haunted by boggarts, so it was a suitable place around which to set a good ghost story. These are the ruins of Kirkstead Abbey near the town of Woodall Spa. Founded as a Cistercian monastery in 1139 for the monks of Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire, it remained in existence until 1537, when Richard Harrison, the last abbot, and 3 of his monks were hanged by Henry VIII for their part in the Lincolnshire Rising of 1536. It used to be said that an underground passageway ran between Kirkstead Abbey and Tattershall Castle, some 3 miles to the south. And according to the following story, recounted by the Reverend James Alperspenny in his book Folklore Round Horncastle, a man went into the tunnel to see whether this was true. So he started with a bugle and a dog, and several people watched him go down and promised to come to his help if he sounded the bugle. So they listened anxiously for a very long time, and at last heard the bugle sound as if it was a very long way off. Then out rushed the dog as if it was mad, and disappeared out of sight and was never seen again. Nor was the man either, for though his bugle kept on sounding, no one dared to help him, and the sound got fainter and fainter until it ceased. So no one knows if the passageway really runs all the way to Tattershall or not, but it is quite clear no one would ever get there, or a quarter of the way either, or able to return, like the dog which went mad with terror. In reality, the tunnel was used to take away sewage from the abbey. It eventually dried up and the entrance was blocked. As for the lost bugler, well, the story is unlikely to be true, as there are many similar legends across Britain associated with tunnels beneath castles and ecclesiastical buildings. Today, all that remains of Kirkstead Abbey is a fragment of the south transept wall of the Abbey Church, which is Grade 1 listed and an ancient scheduled monument. This is the River Humber, a large tidal estuary that forms part of the boundary between the East Riding of Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire. The Humber is the second largest coastal plain estuary in the UK, and its mud and sandbars, which in places form semi-permanent islands, are special areas of conservation. The most substantial of the sandbanks is Reed Island. So named because 300 years ago, local farmers, the Reed brothers, employed shepherds to live and work on the island. Many people have worked on Reed Island over its long history, and many strange stories are associated with this bleak and lonely spot. In 1892, the Lincolnshire Chronicle newspaper described, and I quote, how the island was invaded by an immense swarm of rats. Professional rat catchers and armed men with dogs, ferrets and all manner of traps were sent to the island. The reports claimed the rats were killed at the rate of 400 a day for several successive days. One of the strangest legends associated with the island is that of a werewolf. The story goes that about 400 years ago, a wandering vagabond went to live on Reed's Island and made a living as a ferryman. However, when his passengers started to go missing, the authorities investigated and found hundreds of human bones on the island. At his trial, the ferryman claimed to have transformed himself into a wolf when he killed and ate his unfortunate victims. He was taken away and hanged. But for centuries there have been reports of a half-wolf, half-man type creature haunting the mainland near Reed's Island. The last semi-permanent resident moved off the island in 1989, when major erosion made it uninhabitable. Today, the island is an important nesting and breeding area for birds migrating in the spring and autumn. There is also fallow deer which graze along its banks. The werewolf is not the only horror said to haunt the Humber estuary. According to newspaper reports dating back to the 1920s, a mysterious creature or creatures are occasionally seen in the estuary by Coast Guard and trawlermen. For example, according to the newspaper The Daily Telegraph in March 1934, a night duty Coast Guard near Grimsby came face to face with a huge reptilian creature which suddenly loomed up out of the darkness. Described as having a huge neck, 2 humps and eyes like portholes, the creature submerged and disappeared as he watched. In the same year, 1934, a man from Cleethorpes who spent 51 of his 60 years fishing in the Humber spotted the monster, and not for the first time. He told the Grimsby Telegraph, "You can take it from me, it's no porpoise. It had a big head like a Great Dane, ears and a mane on its neck. There was about 2 feet of head and neck out of the water." The mysterious creature was seen many times during the 1920s and 30s, and the sightings were well documented by local and national newspapers. Many believed that witnesses had merely observed natural phenomenon, such as grey seals, porpoises, or even a giant oarfish, a deep water species rarely seen on the surface, thought by some to have been the cause of sea serpent sightings throughout history. But one thing's for sure, after nearly a century, the true identity of the monster lurking beneath the River Humber will never be known. This is Heckington, one of the largest villages in Lincolnshire. The village is best known for its windmill. Built in 1830, it is the only 8-sailed windmill still standing in the UK and Europe. But I'm not here to see the windmill. I'm here to show you a memorial to a grisly murder. It was popular during the 1820s to commemorate the site of a brutal murder by erecting a murder stone. Now, if you are a regular to my channel, then you will know that I have featured a few notable murder and memorial stones in the county.
And there's an interesting one here in the churchyard in Heckington.
It reads, in memory of William Orton Burbank, late of Wissendine in the county of Rutland, and formerly a seaman on board HMS the Centaur, who was barbarously murdered on the day of, can't read it, I think it says March 1833, I'm sorry. I honestly can't make out the rest. Now, it was a particularly brutal murder, and here are the facts. William Burbank was the local rag and bone man, and after a profitable day on his round, he went to celebrate in a local pub. Now, it was here that he had the misfortune of meeting a man named William Taylor, and he made the mistake of telling Taylor that he had made a few quid on the round that day, about £12, which was a substantial amount of money in 1833. After spending about an hour in the pub, Burbank left and proceeded to make his way to Boston. Now, about a mile outside the village, he was overtaken by Taylor, who knocked him down and bludgeoned him so hard that he literally dashed his brains out. Of course, he stole the money and went on his way. Now, when the body was found the next morning, Taylor was arrested and later convicted of willful murder. He made a full confession at his trial, and he was hanged at Lincoln on March 18th, 1833. Taylor was spared the further punishment of being gibbeted or dissected. Instead, his body was buried within the precincts of Lincoln Prison.
This is Boultham Park in the city of Lincoln. A nice place for a stroll. Well, nice in the daytime, but at night it's the haunt of the ghost with no face.
Stories of faceless apparitions are not uncommon, and according to paranormal researcher Dr. Rob Gandy, a faceless man has haunted this park since the 1970s. The story goes that the phantom appears near the lake and is seen by people walking through the park at night. He is dressed in a long, light-coloured coat and a hat, and as mentioned, he has no face. One of the earliest encounters with the apparition occurred in 1977, when one night 2 girls decided to take a shortcut home through the park. As they reached the play area, one of the girls noticed a dark figure detach itself from the shadows. Although the light was fading, she could see it was a man dressed in a long coat, a hat, and a void where his face should have been. The terrified girls quickened their pace, and when they looked again, the apparition seemed to float into the bushes by the side of the lake and disappear. Of course, they didn't expect anyone to believe their story, but they soon learned that others had seen the faceless ghost haunting the lake in the park. As far as I'm aware, the faceless man has not been seen for many years, and maybe he was just an urban myth. Or maybe you yourself might have cause to walk through the park late one night, and you might experience something to the contrary.
I'm back at the lawn where I started the video, and it's a good place to end it. If you've made it this far, then thank you very much. Take care, and providing you don't fall victim to the werewolf, the sea monster, or the faceless man, I do hope you'll join me again next time.